Hey everybody, welcome back to Listography. Jason, Joe, and Kramzer, and we are about to give our picks for our 5 favorite albums of 1995. So we're into the back half of the 90s already, hard to believe. Moving right along. 1995, a bunch of stuff happened, as with all years. We've got the marriage of Tommy Lee and Pam Anderson, and we all know how that went. Bill Berry has a brain aneurysm on stage in Switzerland. Lyle Lovett and Julia Roberts announced that they're separating after 21 months of marriage. It was a good run, Lyle. He had a nice run there. Alan Wilder leaves Depeche Mode. Scott Weiland is arrested for possession of heroin and cocaine. The members of TLC file for bankruptcy with debts of $3.5 million. Selena becomes the first Hispanic singer to have an album debut and peak at #1 on the Billboard 200. She's also the first and only female artist to place 5 albums simultaneously on the top 200. Jerry Garcia dies of a heart attack. The original lineup of Kiss reunites on MTV Unplugged. The Hall of Fame opens in Cleveland. Shannon Hoon of Blind Melon dies of a cocaine overdose at the age of 28. The Beatles released their first single in over 20 years with Free as a Bird. And the biggest selling album of the year is Cracked Rear View by Hootie and the Blowfish. Top songs of the year are Gangsta's Paradise by Coolio, Waterfalls by TLC, Creep by TLC, Kiss from a Rose by Seal, On Bended Knee by Boyz II Men. And I usually just give the top 5, but I got to go top 6 this year because number 6 is Another Night by Real McCoy, and that is my jam.
I love that song, yeah.
So what do you guys got for your 5 albums?
95 was a great year. Following 94, which was a great year. Really just in the thick of sort of the alternative rock movement. Grunge is sort of winding down a little bit, but you got Britpop and you got the alternative scene rocking. So I had a lot of stuff to pick through. My runners up include Alice in Chains' self-titled, their final album with Lane Staley, who just devolved into a heroin-addled mess. It's a really dark and depressing album, just brutal. Even more so than Dirt. It's really kind of sad to listen to, but it's a good album nonetheless. I also got Ben Folds 5's self-titled debut. I'm a huge Ben Folds fan. Huge Robert Sledge. If not the best bass player of the 90s, definitely in the top 5. And I just love kind of Ben Folds' piano playing. It's super pretty. Also got from across the pond, What's the Story? Morning Glory by Oasis. For some reason, nobody thinks any of us like Oasis after our Oasis video, but we do. I mean, I do. So it's a top 5 for me in a very strong year. And before we get into the top 2, a couple ones that almost made it, but not quite. Tragic Kingdom by No Doubt, which is a really good album. Maybe a little too ska for my taste, but there's a lot of really good songs on it. Jagged Little Pill by Alanis Morissette, Foo Fighters' debut, and Garbage's debut also. A lot of debut albums on here. The top 2, the runner-up, official runner-up is going to be Melancholy and the Infinite Sadness from Smashing Pumpkins. Awesome. 1979, Tonight, Zero, Bullet with Butterfly Wings, Jelly Belly. There's just a million good songs on this album, double album. So there's some soundscapes and maybe stuff that people would classify as filler, but it's just a really good album. Normally it would probably win the year, but we got a top 10 all time for me in 95, and that is, of course, The Bends by Radiohead. People should have seen this coming from me. I think it's the pinnacle of 90s alternative. It's my favorite Radiohead album. I think it basically just changed music in general. Every song on here, Tom York, He brings out that falsetto, sort of the softer side. His songwriting really gets a lot better, I think, after Pablo Honey. Pablo Honey had a lot of good, rock and overdriven guitar tunes, but this one just takes it to another level with the composition, the playing by all the members, just the little things, the guitar solo on the bends, the song, just sort of stuff, it's not overly flashy. It's just sounds perfect. From Planet Telex to Street Spirit Fade Out, there's really not a song on here that I don't think is immaculately written and performed. I say more about it on the Radiohead list, which you should watch. But yeah, the band's just a slam dunk for me. One of my all-time favorites. Just a monumental record in the history of rock and roll music.
Well said. I texted Jason 3 of the 5 albums I thought you would have in your list, and I got all of them. So good for me. 95 is loaded, no doubt. And with that, objectively, the 70s are a better decade, and even, subjectively, my personal taste would be the 70s over the 90s. But it's starting to seem it's a lot closer than I thought, especially just because this is more of our time, probably have a lot more details in the songwriting and the lyrics and the themes of a lot of these albums that relate more to us. So I think the 90s are greatly unappreciated, and I will illustrate that by some albums that didn't make my list before I get my top 5. To Bring You My Love by PJ Harvey, Electropura, Yola Tango, Washing Machine by Sonic Youth, I think is a really underrated Sonic Youth album, Clouds Taste Metallic by Flaming Lips, Ghost of Tom Joad by Bruce Springsteen, Melancholy, Smashing Pumpkins didn't make it for me, I Should Coco, which I'm going to predict Jason picks as his winner, by Supergrass, and this is the one that comes in 6th place, which is really tough. It's The Infamous by Mobb Deep. It's my favorite hip-hop album of all time, but if I'm being serious with myself, there are 5 albums that I like more, even though I would love to really spread out our genres here and get my favorite all-time hip-hop album. I just can't. I like these 5 albums more. I'd be lying if I put it in over these albums. So my runners-up are going to be Ocean Beach by Red House Painters, Elliott Smith with Elliott Smith, Couchmaster by The Bats, a very little-known band here in the States from New Zealand. I would assume maybe Roxanne. Probably know him, girl. Do you know him? Or a guy. You could be a guy. We don't know. We just know you're typing. And then Methadrone by Brian Jonestown Massacre. But my winner, The Bends by Radiohead. And get used to it, boys and girls, because they're going to be a strong contender every year they have a release for me. The Bends, Joe put it beautifully. It's a beautiful album, but it's also a rock and roll album. Tom objectively never sounded better than he does on this. It's just like this soaring, angelic voice. The falsettos are amazing. The playing is great. I think High and Dry is the worst song in the album. I don't hate it, but it's a lot of people's favorite Radiohead song, so that just shows you the strength of the track listing. It's just got a lot of really good passion on it that comes out in the playing. There's crunch to it. There's a lot of really good melodic stuff. The production on it is really unheralded, especially on songs like Nice Dream. The strings in that are just really lush and gorgeous. We talk about it a lot in the Radiohead video, so I won't say too much more, but it was a runaway winner and probably my second favorite album of the 90s. So The Bends by Radiohead, in a really good year, runs away with it.
So yeah, what a year 95 was. Didn't really realize until I really started looking. There's just so much. So I've got a lot to sort of give shout outs to. It's a big year for alt country. You've got Wreck Your Life by the Old 97s, Down by the Old Mainstream by Golden Smog, Faithless Street by Whiskey Town, Tomorrow the Green Grass by the Jayhawks, Wrecking Ball by Emmylou Harris, plus a couple more that actually make my top 5. We'll get to those in a bit. Then you got a lot of other great albums as well, like Sleepy Eyed by Buffalo Tom, Grand Prix by Teenage Fan Club, Post by Bjork, Viva Dixie Submarine Transmission Plot by Sparklehorse, Soup by Blind Melon, Different Class by Pulp, Wowie Zowie by Pavement, Alien Lanes by Guided by Voices, Relish by Joan Osborne is an awesome record. If people only know the one hit from it, I recommend checking that record out as well. 100% Fun by Matthew Sweet is great. So just tons and tons of stuff. 93 was a really, really strong year. I think probably the strongest of the 90s, with 2 albums that potentially are in my top 10 of all time. Not a lot of years can make that claim. 95 doesn't really have that at the top, but it's just so deep with great stuff. So made a last minute switch at the end here. My number 5 spot, initially, I had the self-titled Ron Sexsmith album. When I did my Ron Sexsmith listography, that was my 11th favorite Ron Sexsmith album. It gets bumped, but I feel like he'll be okay. We'll be talking about him more in the future. Swapping in to its place is Melancholy and the Infinite Sadness by Smashing Pumpkins. I've also got AM by Wilco, just a really good alt country record. Is obviously not really indicative of what they would become, but I think it still has a lot of really good songs on it. Going into 95, I was looking at it on paper. It seemed like it was going to be a 2-horse race for the top. And a third candidate kind of came up the rear, and it actually ended up being the dark horse that takes the win. The 2 that I thought were going to be duking it out were I Should Coco by Supergrass and The Bends by Radiohead. So those are both runners-up. My winner for 1995 is Trace by Sunvolt. It's been a while since I listened to it, and it's just, man, really floored me. When we redid Radiohead, I dropped it a few spots on my Radiohead list, and I feel it's not quite hitting me the way it used to. It's still a great record, still absolutely worthy of the top 5, but when you're talking like the best albums of a year, you just take your foot off the gas a little, and something else is going to take that top spot. And for me, it's Trace. I think the songwriting is just fantastic. The best set of songs Jay Farrar ever wrote. I think the playing on it's great. It has a really nice atmosphere and a nice quality to the sound recording. I just think it's impeccable songwriting, and not much more to say about it than that. I mean, it's just a great set of songs.
Well, if you didn't know Jason likes alt country, you know now for sure.
I'm pretty surprised by all of your picks, especially Kramzer's 5 through 2. It's just interesting. It's not what I would have thought for you for 95.
What were you thinking?
I thought you'd go more towards sort of mainstream alternative-ish stuff.
Alice and Smashing Pumpkins, and then. Yeah,
I'm really surprised Smashing Pumpkins didn't make it.
It was my 7. It was my number 7.
Interesting. Okay, well, that's why we do the lists. It's a surprise a minute over here.
Yeah, I thought long shot, a trifecta. I knew the Bends would be in Jason's top 5, but I thought for sure it was going to be I Should Coco. And Jason, did you mention Bjork as a good album? I've never heard you talk about Bjork in my life, I don't think.
I like Bjork a lot, yeah. I don't know that she'll ever crack a top 5, but she's got several that are probably top 10. All right, so the drill. Let us know what you think of our picks down below and leave us your list as well. Make sure you hit the like button, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, hit the bell for notifications, check down in the description for links to all of our social media accounts, and we will see you next week for our favorite albums of 1996.